Well, today we have one of those fascinating readings from Colossians, which is often, by the way, not well represented. Yes, that's indeed the truth. We have one. First of all, you know that there are many people in the church that focus on just a couple of sins. And regardless of what sins you have committed, if you've committed those two, well, you're on your way to hell. The others, not so much. And we're going to see that here, but we're also getting an explanation of what it is that St. Paul teaches and maybe give you an understanding so the next time someone gives you one of those teachings that are right out of, I don't know, this very moralistic black and white understanding that you can learn anywhere, even outside of a Catholic church, then you can say, no, let's have a deeper understanding of what the church actually teaches. We're going to be looking at Colossians, and at which we are this week, as we began last week. Colossians chapter 3, right here on the Catholic Audio Media Podcast, and I thank you for being part of us. Of course, you're listening right now to your favorite podcast platform, but pass the word. Let other people know that you listen to this program, that you enjoy it. Also subscribe and comment. I had an interesting comment. I get interesting comments, but I had a real interesting comment the other day from, and I'm going to mispronounce this, from someone who named I don't know. A-I-N-E, and A has an accent over it, leaning towards the right. We used to learn in French, what's it, accent aigu, accent grave? I don't remember which one is which, leaning toward the right over the A. And she writes, I am a wife, mother, and traditional Irish Catholic, reconvert, who now realizes that everything we've been told for centuries has been false. Enjoying my new journey, searching for truth immensely. Viva Cristo Rey! Yes, indeed. Now, that's an important thing to ask, because as I say, there are people that are teaching things, and you're listening to what they're teaching and you're going, wow, this is what the church teaches. But you know, my ministry is teaching what the church actually teaches. And you'll go and you'll learn here and you go, wow, that's not what the church actually teaches. And that's it. I mean, you can look up what I speak about and you can look it up in church teaching and go, well, that's what it teaches. But you'll, as I say, you always get these online influencers that will teach all kinds of things, and you go, but that's not what the church actually teaches. Or they may bring something else, this is wrong, or this is right, or we have to follow this way, and not explain why. And that's what we're here to help you understand your faith a lot better, and maybe in a way that is not what you were taught, as I say. So, in Colossians today, we have this famous line where St. Paul is talking to us about seeking the things that are above, not the things of earth. So he's calling us to seek Christ and to seek what Christ has to offer to us. That's why I always go to prayer. But what's the difference between the two? And then he gives a list, and we're going to look at that list in a minute. But then he gives a list. But what's the difference between the two? Let me give you one simple line that we can work with, and that is when St. Paul is in Corinthians, and I believe it's 1 Corinthians, he's talking about how to organize their prayer meetings. He says that the Holy Spirit is a spirit of peace. Okay. And the sign of the presence of the Holy Spirit is joy. These things are long-term constant. If you seek the things that are of earth, you're going to seek things that are short-term. They may give you a tremendous happiness, but they are short-term. We need a combination of both. Don't ever think, oh, no, I remember a famous story. There was a guy who was in one of these Pentecostal religions, and he had learned this very strict understanding that we only seek Christ. We don't seek anything of earth, but to an extreme. And someone said, well, I want to have fun. Oh, what is fun? Well, fun is necessary in the spiritual life. It absolutely is. Do you know you cannot be declared? I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be you could not be declared a case. Yeah, a case. You couldn't be declared. You couldn't be declared a saint if you had no sense of humor. And there are those who are seeking sainthood and have zero sense of humor. And we don't want to be connected to them. Or they have no sense of, they have no sense of seeking that which is pleasurable without turning away from Christ. So this is what he's talking about. Seek the things of Christ. But if you make your whole life focused on seeking the things of earth, that's where addiction comes in. Then you're going to always be seeking a greater experience, and it's all short term. However, when we're seeking the things of Christ, then everything is rooted in Christ, including what we may seek is short-term enjoyment. And I only say we don't seek short-term enjoyment, but the things of earth by default are short-term. But then we may be seeking things, but we see it within the light of Christ, and behind all that is the understanding that we are rooted in Christ and we have Christ's love and we seek to please Christ and all the other stuff, which is all rooted in a long-term experience. So you see that there's the short-term and the long-term. So what St. Paul is calling us is not to be focused on the things that the earth gives to you, because it's all short-term, no matter what. Remember, I've told you 1,000 times my life is as a drinker. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I know the first line of alcoholism is that you say you're not an alcoholic. I know that. But I've been sober now for 45 years, so I can assume that whatever I do works. But that's one of the things. But what's all alcoholism about? What is drinking about? It's getting drunk all about. It's about experiencing that feeling in getting high and everything else, but it's still short term. Eventually things come down, and there are people that are always pursuing that long term reality, which doesn't exist. And this is where Paul is coming from. Don't seek the pleasures of the earth. You can seek them, but don't make them your exclusive focus, because you're just going to live a life of frustration. But if you seek that which Christ gives to us that brings us joy. Now, some people use this to moralize. Well, you should be thinking of and seeking the things above, not the things of earth. I don't know if I'll remember this, but I should put an echo on that. If I didn't, then I didn't remember. Not the things of earth. And then you start, oh no, I chewed gum yesterday and I enjoyed it. That's a bad thing. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. I love chewing gum, by the way. I found these great men. We're in the Boston area. This is not a paid endorsement. In the Boston area, in New England, there is a chain of supermarkets called Market Basket. And there's one here in Brockton, Massachusetts. Great store. I mean, there are other great supermarkets in the area, but that's where I do most of my shopping. If you ever see me there, say hello. But I'm at Market Basket, and they sell Market Basket brand mints that have got to be the best in the world. I have to be honest. So if anyone says, well, you can't seek pleasure anymore, that means I can't have the Market Basket mints. No. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go somewhere else. Thank you very much. Not to another supermarket. It reminds me of a true story, which all my stories are true, but a true story where my cardiologist, some of you have heard this, my cardiologist told me he was into the whole, maybe it's the keto diet or the Atkins diet, whatever the case may be. And he told me to give up bread, give up pasta, give up rice, give up. What else? I'll give up potatoes. You got to give all that stuff up. The only thing I gave up was my cardiologist, who I have not seen since that moment, and that's been about 5 years ago. Are you kidding me? I'm going to give up all that stuff. Are you kidding me? No, but I will learn to eat that within context, and that's what I do on my present eating focus, which has led me to lose 52 pounds, 52 pounds, 57 pounds. So that's worked pretty well. But you see, if I listened to my cardiologist and said, no, I want to give up all these things that I enjoy, I would just get frustrated and it wouldn't work. But you do it within context. As a matter of fact, I ended up in the ICU, not related. Because of I got altitude sickness. They sent me as a missionary 13,000 feet up in the Andes, and come to find out I can't exist at that level. Very painful. And so I ended up in the ICU for 2 nights, and I told them, they checked my heart out and everything seemed to be okay. My lungs had just, don't go back up there. And but one of the things I told the cardiologist there, what my cardiologist here in the U.S. said, and he says, you can't live like that. And they eat rice all the time. You can't live like that. So the whole concept, if you get caught into, you can't live without pleasure, you need to be seeking the things above if you're going to live your Catholic faith. No. You seek the things above because they lead us to Christ, who leads us to long-term joy, peace, love, joy, patience, kindness, generosity, self-control. Those are the fruits of the Holy Spirit. But that doesn't mean that you are unable to seek after pleasurable things, because those are required as well. So again, minute my cardiologist said no more of all that stuff, I just said goodbye. See you later. Bye-bye. By the way, just for a little record, you might find this interesting. 2 days I spent in the ICU. Then they brought the bill, $1,100. $1,100, not with insurance. No, $1,100. That's how much it cost me in Peru. That was Peru. For 2 nights in the ICU, just so you know. If you ever get sick, make sure it's in Peru. I don't know. In any case, we're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We're going to talk on the other side about the other things that St. Paul talks about here. We'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and by the way, more people are, checking out the Patreon page, and because things go up there in advance. You're listening to this on the podcast, which we're really happy you're doing that. Others have already heard it on the Patreon page. And so just so you know, because that's where everything is previewed, including some of my written stuff, which you don't hear on the podcast. So check it out. You can check out the written stuff at the Patreon page, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, or at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. So we're talking here about this, what St. Paul is talking about, and we're talking about the understanding of pursuing that which is above, not that which is below, but that it's not exclusive. Otherwise, you're going to live like a hermit, which I've lived like a hermit, but only for 11 days. I did it twice. It's wonderful. I'd love to do it, but I wasn't called to that life. So what you need to do is you got to understand that certain things are pleasurable, and that's okay. That's okay. You want to have them legitimately. And when you say, oh no, if I follow Christ, I can never, have fun anymore, then you will follow Christ for you'll be just like the seed that lands on rock. There's no roots. It's not going to work. And that's just the reality. That's an ancient spiritual principle. I knew the case of a man who lived a very strict teaching, very strict way of life. I think he was, it wasn't as a hermit, but not too far off. He lived with a community of people who lived a very strict way of life. And then he had a chance to see the outside. This is many years after he entered religious life, so it wasn't that he never saw the outside. And I looked at some of the actions he was doing. None of them were illegitimate. None of them were sinful or wrong, but I looked at some of the actions he was doing. I don't want to go into the details because I want to make it obvious. Some of the obvious, if he happens to be listening, some of the actions he was doing. And I said, he is not long for that religious life. And he's not. He left soon afterwards. Why? Because he never had the opportunity to balance, and it was just the nature of his life, and balance the things of the earth with the things of God. And you need a proper balance. That's what you need. Well, then St. Paul continues, right? And then he wants you to get rid of everything that is earthly. Now, when you look at this list, we can see the things that are earthly. Okay, fornication, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which is idolatry. And he says that the wrath of God is coming on those who engage in those things. Now you're going to live in terror. The wrath of God is coming down. Why? Because he uses a term in there when he talks about greed. It's idolatry. That's why. You got to understand, you will find that if you do engage in those things, you're going to end up living a lifestyle that virtually worships that which gives you those things. That's why. It's idolatry, which you won't experience with the proper balance, because with the proper balance, you realize, obviously, in the proper balance, those things I just listed aren't there. But with a proper balance, as St. Augustine says, all things in moderation. Obviously you want to turn away from sin, but don't get into the idea of, God's wrath is coming after me. There are plenty of people who preach that, or at least preach that in the past. No, you want a good balance, but why is it wrong? Because it becomes idolatrous, and that replaces God as your God. That's why. And so that's an important consideration. That's the important thing. So it's about idolatry, and turn away from idolatry. Always remember, you need a balance, and seek after the things above, because those are the long-term joys. Those are the long-term things that lead us closer to Christ, that make us more what Christ called us to be. The things of the earth are necessary. They are gifts from God, but within their proper context and within moderation. Then he goes on and says, and get rid of such things as anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive language from your mouth. Okay, and what are those all about? I want my world my way, and you are standing in the way. Those are you enforcing your faith, not your faith, your will upon others. And when others don't follow your will, you use those tools against them. So that's all then. It says, do not lie to one another. So get rid of all of that. And that also tells you the lifestyle that these people left. These are former pagans, that they left. And even if they weren't practicing that lifestyle, other people around them were. So we recognize these words. We recognize what's being said here, and we recognize it within context. Don't listen to people say, oh, it says here in Colossians, this is the way you must live your life. No, what Paul is talking about is 3 different orientations. And you want to focus on one, you want to balance it with the second, and you want to avoid the third. It's really that way. And when you do that, you're doing what St. Paul says. But if anyone tells you, no, you need only to be focused on the things above, you can't. You'll be like my poor cardiologist who no longer sees me ever again. Sorry, it just, no. Or anyone who teaches that kind of a practice. We can't, one of my favorites, right? I mean, remember, when I was in high school, I was in the high school during the 70s. Yes, I'm that old. I'm come from a time where we literally have to put our finger in a hole and move that finger a whole bunch of digits to dial a telephone number. Yes, I am all that old. Yes. So, but you go back to that time and when we lived, and people were saying back then, rock and roll music is evil. And the people in the generation before them used to say, this jazz music is evil. And then the people before that, this blues music is evil. You always had those people, but there were people that would say, don't listen to rock and roll music. Well, what happens? Many years later, they discovered rock and roll music and they go, wow, this was wonderful. Why wasn't I listening to this in the 70s? Do you see? It doesn't work if you buy into these ideas where you have to turn from everything that is pleasurable in order to find Christ. You're just going to become a dour, miserable SOB. That's what you're going to become, unless you have a special calling to follow that way. But God is going to give you special graces like that. But as Thomas Merton always taught, you need pleasure to survive in life. That's important, but you don't want to have a life unbalanced in pleasure, so that it's only focused on pleasure, because then it becomes idolatrous. So you need a good balance in life. Now, there are many people that may be saying, they wouldn't be listening to this, but may say, I don't care about God. I don't care about anything. I'm just going to seek after what makes me happy, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. That's the polar opposite of those who believe that they're only called to seek after the things of heaven. Things of Christ. That's just seeking the things of earth. They have no more balance than the ones who are over-focused on seeking the things above. You need a proper balance. All things in moderation. Reminds me of kind of a funny story. I had a pastor in my first, when I came back to the church. This was at St. Charles Borromeo in Point Loma, California. And the pastor there smoked like a chimney, as the saying goes. Someone tried to get him to quit smoking, and so they gave him a carton of True cigarettes, which were these low-tar, low-nicotine cigarettes. And he would sit at meetings, break the filter off so he'd be smoking, just like he'd be smoking a straight cigarette with no filter. Break the filter off and smoke his cigarette. He loved smoke. I don't know if he loved, but he was clearly addicted, and he smoked all the time. And I was at Coffee and Donuts one time. We had Coffee and Donuts at the parish. And I had a friend of mine, when I was in the Navy, his shipmate came. He was not Catholic. And he looked and he said, that priest is smoking. And I said, yeah, we're Catholics. We believe in all things in moderation. We believe in drinking. We believe in smoking. We believe in dancing. We believe, yes, even in gambling. We believe in all those things within moderation. So, yes, we do. And many people don't understand, if you're going to be a true disciple of Christ, you have to turn from all that stuff. That's just going to fill you with pride. Literally, it's going to do that. And you're going to be obnoxious to people. Because what are you going to say? I will never smoke. I do not drink. There was a survey, and the people who come from those cultures that say, that don't allow drinking usually have the biggest hidden drinkers, usually have the biggest alcoholics, because they have to hide their drinking and they can't tell anyone, yet they're still drinking. Yeah, it's not good. But, you come out and say, I will never smoke. I will never drink. I will never dance. I will never. Yeah, well, okay. Until all of that collapses on you and you come to a point where you have to smoke, or you have, well, you know what I'm saying. That whole principle collapses on you. That's an ancient spiritual principle. It's one of the reasons why, if you ever are involved in any kind of a diet, don't look for a diet that tells you to give up food. And I focus on that. I've taught you that about Lent. Don't give up candy. One of my favorite foods is Hershey Hugs. Hershey Hugs. They're like Hershey Kisses, but they're made of white chocolate and what do you call it? White chocolate and white chocolate. I'll call it that. Okay. Hershey's Hugs. I after my meal at supper, if I have enough calories left, I'll have a bunch of those. They're only 22 calories apiece. So I'll have those Hershey Hugs. That's something I enjoy. If I ever lived in a world where, and if they don't have the hugs, then I have the kisses. There you go. But it's true. If I live in a world where that was forbidden, you can never have that again, then eventually it would collapse and I'd be eating them by the carton. Another example of this, they don't sell Nestle's Crunch. As far as I know, I could be wrong here, but I go from my experience. They don't sell Nestle's Crunch in Brazil. And it's not against the law or anything. It's just they don't sell them there. And sometimes I've gone to Brazil, I've gotten, could you do us a favor? Could you please bring a bunch of Nestle Crunch? Because we can't get it here in Brazil. It becomes the forbidden fruit. So what St. Paul wants you to do, and you have to realize something. This is so important. There is so much that is not written down. There is so much information that is not there. There is so much information that Paul would have discussed on a daily basis on a personal level, but it's not written down, so no one knows. And Paul would have explained, no, you don't exclusively seek one over the other two. One you avoid, one you seek in moderation, and then one you make your highest priority. That's what St. Paul is calling us to do. We're going to be back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we're continuing through this week. Tomorrow we'll talk more of many of these principles. We're going to continue with Colossians. We're going to look at the other side of this reading that we looked at today, and that is, this one is what St. Paul says essentially what not to do. And as I explained, you have to look at it as three different levels, and you pursue one, use the other in moderation, the third you avoid. And then we have to look at, what we're going to look at tomorrow is what St. Paul says to do. So that's coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, remember, we're here every single Monday through Friday. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page and our Substack. You hear me the way I'm saying that? Yes, because sometimes I get this habit of speaking in the third person plural. We are going to do this. No, we are not. I am going to do this. So I have a habit of doing that. In any case, so tune us in tomorrow, where we're going to talk about the next part of Colossians. And remember, you can find these readings there. I'm just going by your daily reading. So check out what the daily reading is at Mass. I go by the first reading usually. Occasionally, I focus on something else, but that's what I do, and that's where you can follow along. So if you want to read the daily reading tomorrow in preparation for listening to the program, which drops at midnight, feel free and check that out. But check out the daily reading today or when you're at Mass. Yes, that was what the reading is all about. And as I have learned, by doing this, not only do I teach you, but I learn more so that I can teach you. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day.